Welcome everybody to the Coaching Lounge podcast. I'm very excited today. This is our second edition in the series, and I'm joined today by somebody who I've grown very fond of. I've been very fortunate to work with, and she's delivered training for me, with me being one of the trainees. And it's Lindsey Agness. Welcome to the show, Lindsey.
Thanks, Kelly. Really delighted to be here today.
So to start off, I think it'd probably be helpful for our listeners if you could give a brief introduction and a bit of background on who you are.
Yeah, cool. So Lindsey Agness, and I've had a very interesting career, actually. I'm kind of coming out the other end at the moment, although finding that transition a little bit of a challenge. But I started my career working for the public sector. And then at one point, I was very fortunate to have a team of consultants from PwC working for me, designing some new systems for my department. Anyway, long story short, I ended up going to work for them. So that was a kind of unexpected turn in my career, but one that brought great joy, actually, and a lot of personal development. So I spent 11 years as a change consultant in PwC. And I guess that's where I became really curious about this whole topic of emotional intelligence, leadership, behavior, how to get people to do something different, when an organization is going through huge periods of change. And it was while I was at PwC that I was fortunate enough at the time, they wanted to help me improve my influencing skills, because I was one of the few kind of senior female managers at the time. And they suggested that I went off and went on an NLP course, and I had no clue what NLP was at the time, but I thought, well, they're going to give me a week off work, so I may as well go and do it. And it just blew me away, really. And I guess from that point in my career, I knew that NLP, or neuro linguistic programming, was going to become a big factor in the way that I operated. And so I started to introduce it into my corporate work, into my projects with PwC. And it was also NLP that gave me the confidence and courage to leave and to set up my own company way back in the kind of mid 2005, I think it was. So I've been doing it quite a while now, and I've had two streams to that business. One has been using NLP as part of my kind of leadership or behavioural change work in organisations, and also supporting individuals, to show up in the best way that they possibly can. And that's what I have been doing for the last nearly 20 years, really, since I set up my own company, and getting, an awful lot out of it. But certainly the foundation for all of my work is NLP.
And tell me, in terms of NLP and its practical applicability, put my teeth in, neurolinguistics programming. Now, you and I are both huge exponents of NLP, because we understand the massive benefits it can bring to every aspect of life. And I guess for me, the question is, in your experience working with various teams and individuals as well, how have you found the application of NLP to be most powerful?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think it kind of works in a number of ways. And how we've used it a lot is, I suppose, that on one level, it's to help the individuals in the organisation, whether they be the leader of a team or people within the team, to understand about their own personal style, their behaviour, their personality, how that impacts on the team, how they can influence others more efficiently. So it's been that personal journey. And I guess also giving them strategies around a mindset for success, of which, learning more about themselves has been part of that. But it's also been around how can they kind of set themselves up for success? What's different about a mindset for success? And so, for example, one of those tools would be always taking responsibility. So in NLP, we talk about, are you on the cause side of the scenario or on the effect side? So, and in business, you see it all the time, really.
Yes.
Teams blaming other teams for things that haven't been delivered on time, or things that haven't gone well, relationships that have broken down, and really just at that very kind of fundamental level, getting people to have a look at owning those situations, because if you own them, then you can learn from them. So there's been this piece around mindset for success, and then there's been that piece around the whole thing around emotional intelligence, sensory acuity, being much more aware of what's going on around you, being able to build better rapport with your team members and your clients. And of course, the L in NLP is also around language. So again, how can you use your language to motivate people around you in the best possible way? So it's kind of been that personal management. It's been that management of teams, and then you can kind of chunk that up really to management of organizations as well, and having a look at cultures of organizations using NLP as the basis of that, modeling great behavior in the organization. Who pick someone who's a huge success in the organization. All organizations have got people like that. What is it that they do differently, and what can we learn from those individuals? And we've had some great projects around modeling, and then of course you can develop programs for other people, development programs, and teach those skills and teach those capabilities and behaviors. So it kind of works, I think, on those 3 levels. So management of me as a person, management of my immediate team, and also as a senior leader, how can I bring it into that kind of global management of my or leadership of my entire organization? So it's a very long answer.
No, it's a great answer. And the thing I love about it most is that, we're on the same page completely about the idea that coaching and development is all about personal development. And then how does that translate into my responsibility and accountability within the organization, especially in a leadership position? Because the better understanding I have of myself, then the greater chance there is of me being able to have a positive impact on the people I'm leading, and therefore on the success of the business. Got a curveball question for you, I think, a little bit. How do you respond to the idea that some people might see neuro-linguistics programming, or NLP, as being coercive, even perhaps subversive, or somewhat a black art of getting people to do something against their will? How do you respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, and it's something that I've been asked many times, as you might imagine, really throughout my career. And sometimes, I would have to say that when I've developed or designed something for an organization, I might not have explicitly talked about NLP, because it has got this kind of slight name out there, and yet it's the most powerful change or toolkit that I've ever discovered for change. And I think one of the things is to get it in perspective, really. I mean, there are tools within NLP to be able to improve your influencing skills. And, that's how, when I was first offered to go on the program, that was why, I was sent off. Because I used to find myself in rooms of kind of, I was much younger than, of course, much older, men in grey suits, and I used to sit there and not say a word. So yes, it can impact your influencing skills. It can help because you are turning up your sensory awareness. You start to feed back. We can mirror and match certain language patterns, certain behaviours of other people, and build rapport with them much faster. But one of the things that I was taught, very early on, is that a couple of things actually. But first of all, we use these skills with integrity. So, if we have an outcome in mind, which is to help this individual or this team get to, become a higher performing team, then, surely it's a good thing to be able to motivate them to be able to do that. I don't think there's absolutely anything wrong in that at all. And the other thing is, of course, NLP is not the only technology out there for influencing people. I mean, if you've ever wanted to go, walked into a car sales showroom, to buy a second-hand car, the show men and women will throw anything at you, to get you to buy a car. So I think, in this kind of NLP has got this bit of a reputation, and yet there are so many other things out there which I would say are far worse, to be frank. I've always used it with that kind of integrity in mind. So I always say to myself, what is the goal of this person or this team? If I can help them by using my influencing skills to get to their outcome, teach them those influencing skills. And if that outcome is a positive one, it's going to help that organization be a much, kinder, higher performing culture, whatever it might be, then surely that's a good thing.
Thanks. It's interesting your observation about how it has been perceived in the past. I think that's changing. My experience of working and speaking to various chief people officers over the recent months has been that they're really keen on understanding how it can be integrated into leadership development. And I know in coaching, I use it all the time with that best intention in mind, all the time. It's about getting the very best out of the opportunity for whomever's being developed in a team setting or individually. How would you describe it in terms of how would you describe the application in terms of teams? Because the reason I ask this question is that, like me, I know you strongly believe in positive psychology, and I wonder about individual strengths and how NLP can be applied to be able to understand how that can mesh together within a team. How have you experienced that yourself?
Again, I think there's many ways that you can use it with a team. Some of the ways that I have used it in the past, NLP is very results orientated. And so, one of those early things would be to get the team working on what is their purpose, what are their goals. They might be short-term goals, long-term goals, but get the team motivated behind a very clear set of goals. And that sounds simple, but in my experience there are a lot of teams that don't have that quite right, or don't really have clarity around those goals. And then of course to set very clear and specific timescales around those, clear plans around those goals. So that's on one very practical level where it can be a great help. I think one of the game changers is around values. And of course, we talk about values in an organization, and a team will have its own set of values as well. So really working with the team to look at how they can support the values of the organization, what's important for the team as a whole, and get people united and have some input into those values can be very empowering and motivating for a team. Some people might realize they're not in the right place, and that's probably a good thing to happen. But if a team is united around a set of values, then I think that can be transformational for the team. So having very motivational goals, having that united front behind a set of values. And also what I talked about earlier is that clear communication. So I think the team, to be a high performing team, needs to have that commitment to giving feedback and obviously positive and developmental feedback. And again, in my experience, that's a skill that is often lacking within individuals in a team. And I think NLP gives people some language to be able to do that, and to get those permissions to be able to do that. And so there's just a few ideas really that I think do make a real difference to teams.
I agree with you, Lindsey. And I think what's interesting for me is there's been a couple of times I've had conversations with senior leaders about understanding what their teams, their leadership teams below them, what their values are. And the response I get often straight away is, we've got our company values. I always say, yeah, that's amazing. You've got your company mission, your values, you know where you're going, but your team underneath needs to know its purpose and therefore what its own value structure is. So it feeds into that overarching, those overarching values of the whole business. And I think there can be, there's little trepidation, I think, sometimes about the idea of teams having their own values as well. But our job, I guess, is to help the businesses to understand the real value and how it's going to help the teams take accountability for what they need to deliver for the business.
Yeah, it can quite often be a bit of a kind of gap, gate or a gaping hole in some instances. But I think also that way, that ability to be able to teach and enable teams to have that kind of positive conflict. It's a conflict that helps them achieve their goals, rather than, as you find in many teams, these kind of avoidant type strategies where people will dance around the problem, and nobody or very few people may have the courage to actually tackle what really needs to be tackled. So I think that can make an enormous difference. It's the difference between a kind of, I suppose, good team and a really, top performing team.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think there's it's interesting. I think with NLP, it's a choice about when people are being trained on it or given the insights about different techniques. It's like learning to drive a car. You need to go away and put it into practice in order to be able to integrate it into your neurology to make it just second nature for you going forwards. What about in terms of leaders you've coached? I'm interested to understand, and I'm sure our listeners will be too. I'm interested to understand about how you go about integrating NLP into those sessions, because as you and I both know, if you start explaining everything that's going on, then the impact may be diminished significantly. How do you go about dealing with that?
Gosh, that's an interesting question. I mean, I guess with when I work with leaders, it tends to be chunked down into reasonable number of sessions, so you can't obviously deal with everything at once. But I think some of the things I've talked about with the team, I would mirror with a leader. So really, in the beginning, it's about helping them get clarity on what it is they want to do differently, or what it is that they want to change. And sometimes it might start off with a performance goal in some way, and yet when you start to coach them around that, there is something that sits behind that, which is around what they believe is possible for themselves, or something that's happened in the past, that stops them from being a great presenter, or whatever it might be. But presentation skills is something that comes up quite often, and using those kind of NLP skills just to enable them to explore, and I suppose build their personal awareness around where some of these limiting beliefs that might hold them back, where they come from. I mean, it's not a therapy session, but where, just to help them understand that in a bit more detail. I mean, I remember a long time ago now working with a very senior guy in a very kind of famous media company, and he had a real fear of standing up on the stage, and yet he had to do that often. And it was just interesting, just in the some of those early sessions, learning that he had come from he was born in a European country, and had come from a very kind of fairly humble farming family, and that voice in his head that every time he went to get up on a stage was saying to him, well, you're going to make a mess of this, aren't you? So just helping people become aware sometimes of what's going on in their mindset, and start to challenge that and reframe that, so that they can show up in the best way that they can. And obviously then, if they if their beliefs and their goals then become aligned, then they're much more likely to achieve them. But that can take a couple of sessions, or it can take a lot longer. Some of these neural pathways are a lot stronger than others. But I do like to think that it gives me the toolkit to work on a number of different levels with individuals, without, as I say, becoming a therapist, and to help them align their goals with what's going on within their own personal mindset. I don't know if I answered the question. I kind of went off on a bit of a ramble, but
no, you did really beautifully, actually. You did beautifully. I think it leads on to a question for me. It was interesting you're talking about the client experience you had, and that leads into me, I think, this thing about resilience, and how it is that leaders in particular can develop resilience and actually use NLP to help them in the moment to be able to understand that they that they have an accountability and a need actually to be resilient enough for their teams. And I wonder if there's something you can share about that to do with NLP is all about the mind-body connection and how that impacts our way of being in the moment. I wonder if you could expand on that a bit for us.
Yeah, I'll do my best. I mean, one of the things that we learn really at practitioner level, and I often say if you chunk up an NLP practitioner course, it's all around learning how to manage your internal state. So how you feel moment to moment. And, I think that's a big part of resilience. If you start to realize that it's not the external world that makes you feel a certain way, it's how you think that makes you feel a certain way, and start to learn that you can manage that. So, if you are having a low energy day, there are some choices around that. You can, everybody has low energy days from time to time. But if you're having a low energy day and you're a leader and it's an important day and you've got to motivate the team to get on with stuff, then, there are ways of shifting your state from moment to moment. I mean, I personally use a few things. One of them is running, or walking, exercise. I think it's a very personal thing, but I think everybody has to find those strategies that will support them. I think one of the things that NLP helps me with is that discipline. So I've run a lot of marathons in the past. It's that mindset around focus. Your energy flows where your attention goes. So learning that early on as well is really important. So, if my energy is low, then I'm not gonna perform in the best way that day. But what's good is to learn how to shift, that energy really, really quickly. And I do that. But if I haven't got time for a run, I might just walk around the block, or I might even stand up and do some star jumps. Or the other thing that I'll do is, which we learn at practitioner level, is to think about a time in the past. Literally will change your state instantly when you had a good outcome, a day when you were really in flow, you had a lot of success, it was a brilliant day. As we can take ourselves back to those times, and then we can get ourselves in a much better place to be able to manage our teams. And so I think for resilience, it's a mix of all of those things, really. It's about mindset and knowing what to do to change your mindset and get it in a much more high energy place. It's about what you need to do with your physical body, to get the energy flowing. It's a combination really of all of those things. But I do know that I'm a very focused person. I think maybe I've always been fairly disciplined, but I think learning NLP, it's really, and that idea about, focus on what it is that you want rather than what you don't want, and realizing that your energy will flow to whatever you focus on. It's a bit like saying in the instant, right now, if I said to you, Kelly, what does it feel like to sit in the chair you're sitting on? Suddenly you become aware of what it feels like. And yet up until then, you had no awareness of that. So whatever we focus on, that's where our energy and our attention goes. So it's having the tools to be able to change that, I think, makes a huge difference. And for people to realize they drive their own bus.
That's a great way of putting it. I love that. And it's interesting, isn't it? I think that going back to what you said earlier about high performing teams, I think that the idea of, for me, I know that, and I have low energy days and I sometimes lose focus. And the key I know is that because I've decided what my goal looks like and I really believe in it and I can see it and I feel it and I really believe where it is. And I know when it's going to arrive because I put a time stamp on it, if you like. I know that those times where I'm feeling a little bit knocked off balance or I'm feeling a little bit under pressure, I remind myself of where I'm going, and and it gives me all the energy back in an instant because I've already decided it's going to be great when I get there. So therefore, in that moment, I can refocus everything back in that direction. We're coming towards the end. I wonder if there's anything else. Are there any sage words you'd like to share?
Gosh. I think one of the things that I don't know why it's just popped into my head. So if it's popped into my head, it must have popped into my head for a reason. One of the things that I was told by my NLP mentor, many years ago, and I said to him, how long will it take, to reach my goal? And he said, Lindsay, it takes as long as it takes in a way, and it is what's really important is to take action, is to do something, because if you do something, even if you don't get it quite right, you can get the learning and adjust things and go off in a different direction. But so many people just get stuck.
Yeah.
Just literally, and a lot of my work, I often say, is around unsticking people, because they get stuck by fear and the unknown and all those sorts of things. And I think what's important, whether it's as an individual or as a team, it's starting to have the courage to do something a little bit different, and then to learn from those experiences, and make adjustments on the way, and by all means have a time frame, and that might need to flex for whatever reason as you go through the process. So I think, having a bit of flexibility as well, and not being too hard on yourself. I had a client this morning, and just it was interesting because we talked a lot about expectations, because if you put too great an expectation on yourself or on your team, then, you're likely to get disappointed at some point in time, or the team gets to burn out at some point in time, because there's far too much pressure on them. So it's always that balance about obviously having goals and having a focus, and making sure that you're going at a reasonable pace, but not too fast, that people are going to burn out on the way. So that's what just popped into my head.
No, I think they're really wise words, and I think they're one that I can echo your sentiments. I know with clients that's a recurring theme with different flavors each time. So I empathize with you totally. Lindsay, thank you very much indeed for joining us today. I've really enjoyed your time, and thank you for sharing your insights about NLP and leadership. And there's so many more topics that have popped into my head that we could talk about, and I hope you come back on again at some point in the future.
Yes, I would absolutely love to, Kelly. So, and it's been my pleasure to come along and join one of your very first podcasts in what I know is going to be an amazing series in the future.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. Thanks very much indeed.